past weekend, I was lucky enough to be invited to the pre-alpha of Project Rise by Supercell Games. Throughout that time, I had a 3-hour play session on Saturday and a 3-hour play session on Sunday, which I live streamed on the channel. If you want to check that out, it's live on the channel now. You can see all of that exclusive gameplay and see what the game is all about. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my impression of the game as a whole. I have in-depth experience inside of action RPGs, and I knew that Supercell was going to take the genre and do it in a different way, which I quite like. So I want to share with you guys my thoughts and how I feel the game needs to stay the same or possibly change so that we can hopefully get a global release. Remember, this is early alpha. The game is pretty bare. There's a basic game mode. When you look at the main screen, there's not a lot there, but we have alpha coming, beta will then follow, and then we can cross our fingers that we actually get a global release, which I think we should. Now, since I consider myself an expert in action RPGs, I have decided to cover this title as it is developed and once it releases right here on the channel. If you're into that type of thing and you enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that anything that comes out for Project Rise, you know what's going on because I got you covered right here. And if you want to, me being a Supercell creator now for 8 years, you could use my code ECHO, which supports me when you use it in any game for Supercell. So let's start off today with the different characters that you could play inside of the game, starting with the Barbarian. Now, the Barbarian's main attack is going to be a simple sword slashing movement, but if you hold down the main attack, it's going to do a ground stomp and do damage to all surrounding enemies. It's an area of effect damage type skill. Then all classes have 2 skills, a main skill and a sub skill. For the Barbarian, the main skill is a charging motion where he will charge into and knock back enemies. The sub skill is a shorter dash that allows for stunning, so you can actually go and daze your opponents, but in a very short range. Then we have the Valkyrie, whose primary attack is going to be a tri-hit, a 3-hit combo, and the 3rd hit is one of those spinning whirling attacks. Now, if you hold down primary attack, she's gonna throw her axe in a straight line, and it's gonna explode whenever it hits something. The main skill is a 360 spin attack, and the sub skill is a little bit of a jumping motion. It's gonna add some mobility to the class, also doing damage, but allowing you to evade certain situations. Next up, the ranged archer. You want to stay and keep your distance with this archer class. The normal attack when you tap it is just a simple shot of the arrow, but if you hold that button down, it's going to be a much stronger arrow attack. It's going to go through enemies and knock them back. The main skill is shooting 3 arrows at once, and they tend to jump around with each other, doing a lot more damage to masses of enemies. And the sub skill is an evade mechanic that marks enemies as you go through them, which can allow for a higher crit chance against those enemies in the future. Then we have the Fisherman, whose regular attack is a 3-hit combination of slapping someone with a fish. And when you hold down the primary attack, he's going to throw out his anchor and pull in any enemies close to him. The main skill is a wave that will come out and knock back enemies. And his sub skill is he goes surfing on his wave, knocking back enemies as he moves through. Again, this is a nice movement skill. And then we have the Firecracker. The primary attack here is just a tap with a single rocket being shot, but if you hold down the attack, that'll be a much more powerful rocket that explodes and does area effect damage. The main skill is tossing a bag of fireworks. It looks like a bomb. It has a big range, and after approximately 2 seconds, it'll detonate and explode and do an area of effect damage. And the sub skill is another one of those evade skills where you have a long distance flipping evade while you do damage with rockets to people that you're evading over. Now, there was a Hog Rider inside of the game as well, but it was not yet available, so we couldn't test it out, but I'm looking forward to. Now, my recommendation and my favorite heroes inside of the game are, well, if you like melee style combat, I think that the Fisherman is probably the best, better than the Barbarian and the Valkyrie. But if you liked range classes, which I actually loved inside of the game, the Firecracker is my favorite. The evade skill and the attack is just fantastic, as well as the range. But again, you're a ranged class, you need to stay out of harm's way. Now let's talk about gameplay. We're looking at an action RPG where you want to level up your character. You're doing this inside of a tower format, and the way that I like to look at that is each level of the tower is like a small dungeon that we know from action RPGs. You start on level 1. On level 1, it's a pretty easy level. You get from the beginning of the stage, you find the elevator at the end, and you fight a boss. If you beat the boss, well, then you progress to the next level. I've found that each stage takes approximately 2 to 5 minutes to complete, which really fits well the way that Supercell likes to have their gameplay. Very easy to pick up, play quickly, and put it down for later. And if you stop playing, your level is saved, and when you turn the game back on, you could pick up where you left off. Now, there's a lot to talk about, though, in that beginning the stage to the ending of the stage. You have potions that you can pick up, there's crystals that you can get, and most importantly, there are perks that you can utilize. So let's quickly talk about the potions that you could find along the way. Now, potions are only going to help you on the floor that you're currently on. So when you progress to the next floor, your potions are gone. And you have one for attack, one for health, one for speed, and one that's going to improve your critical hit, which is essentially going to make you do more damage when you hit people. Depending on how you're building out your class and what you want your hero to look like, you'll choose which potions best benefit the build that you're putting together with the perks that we'll talk about in a minute. Now, you have these crystals. When I was streaming, I was calling them elixir, but really they are crystals, and you could find them from the destructible environment. You could just take things down that have this goop look coming from them, which is actually the crystals that I thought was elixir, and you could save that up for when you find a wishing well. These crystals can be spent at a wishing well, and they'll give you buffs like increased health or increased crit damage, or they can even upgrade the perks that you're currently using, which we're going to talk about next. So it's very advantageous of you to pick up as many crystals as you can as a team and then spend them in the wishing well, especially before you get to a final boss, because when you go to the next stage, those crystals are gone. They are only for that one stage. And as you level up, or when you start progressing through the game, you will unlock different perks. Perks come as a variety of different options. You can improve your health, your critical hit attack damage, and many, many other things. There are specific ones that you're going to want for builds that you're going for. And perks that you accumulate through level 1 carry over to level 2, which you can then level up as you go. Perks come as a rank 1 perk, and you could rank them up to rank 3. Now, as you progress, your team as a whole, because you're playing with 2 other players, you will all get a chance to upgrade your perks. And it rotates. If I'm the first person to get the perk the first time around, and the other 2 people are behind me, I will then be the last one the next time we have perk upgrades. And there's a really cool mechanic that I quite like inside of the game that allows you to put a heart on the perk that you want. So if you're playing with a team of friends and you need that perk for the build that you're putting together, they can see that and choose a different perk instead. Or they could just take it themselves and completely ignore your heart. So you get these perks from leveling up, or you can get more levels from them if you go to a wishing well, but this is where you want to pay close attention. Because at the end of the day, you're starting at level 1 of this tower, but you want to get as high as you can get. And it really is focused on how well you build out your perks for the build you're making for the class you're playing. And at the end of each round, you get to save a certain number of those perks. Some extra ones that you have may be lost. In the beginning, you can save 3. Then when you get a little higher in level 4 and 5 and so on, so your build can really continuously advance. I foresee there being more and more perks added to the game over time, which will add for more diverse builds. And that's what we love about action RPGs, being able to completely make our builds our own. So the more classes and the more perks, the better we are. Now, you heard me talking about playing with other players. I didn't even mention this, but you play with 2 other players inside of the game. If I'm going in as a firecracker, there can't be another firecracker. So someone else will have to be another class, like a barbarian and a fisherman, with me as the firecracker. And then you will go through the stage. You start in the center of the map, and then you have to find your way to the exit. You could take your time and explore, or you can just try and know exactly where that exit is, move towards it quickly, and then get into that final boss battle, which is often a Mega Knight and a whole bunch of other enemies. I would love to see a little bit more diversity with the end bosses right now, and I bet you that there will be in the future. Keep in mind, we're in early alpha now, so most of the end bosses were a Mega Knight and a bunch of other enemies, but as time goes on, potentially the Mega Knight is just a placeholder, and maybe there'll be different enemies and bosses that we encounter along the way, which would actually be really cool. And to be honest with you, I can't even criticize here because I think that that is going to be the plan, and the Mega Knight is just a placeholder for now. But on your way to that end boss, you have really nice stages. Everything is very much themed to the Supercell theme, and the music inside of the game, it's really good. I actually like it. Now, of course, if you play Clash of Clans for 8 years, you probably play with the game sounds off, or at least the game music off. That'll happen with any game that you play because it becomes repetitive, but I quite liked the music from the different stages inside of Project Rise. I thought it was really nice and fun to listen to, and sometimes even motivating. It was pretty cool, and it fit the action RPG theme quite well. Now, the enemies you encounter, there were a lot of different ones. Some that were easy to take down, like skeletons and maybe even some goblins, but they got more difficult as you went. There were also more difficult enemies to take down. There was this blue guy that would teleport around and stab me, and he took me down a few times. I don't even know what the class was, but he was tough to beat sometimes. And as you progress from one stage to the next, the enemies you encounter, they become higher in level. So on stage 1, they may be at level 1, but when you get up to stage 20 something, they could be level 9 and a lot more difficult to defeat. And as you really aren't getting stronger as you progress, you need to make sure that your perks are getting stronger to benefit your build so you could artificially build your strength and your health. The mechanic was actually quite smooth and I liked it a lot. And as I mentioned, the stages were great. They had destructible environments. I was not expecting that, but you could break your way through walls, break different elements inside of the game, go inside of houses where sometimes you could even find a resurrection feather. Yeah, we didn't talk about those, but your team has a certain number of resurrections. If you die in the game, you're down for a certain amount of time, approximately 10 seconds, and if a teammate stands on top of you, you have a ring around you that will get full, and if you get resurrected by your teammate, you don't have to use a feather. But if a teammate can't get to you, or if all 3 of you die, you have 3 resurrection feathers. These are shared amongst the entire team, and then you could come back to life. So you really always want to try to bring your teammates back to life. You're playing together, which is also a good reason why you should run through the map together and not separate yourselves. You want to save those feathers in case you need them for the final boss, but you can also find them inside of the game. Little hint here, sometimes they're hiding inside of huts and things like that. Sound was great. Enemies were decent. I would assume that we're going to get more and more enemies that we can take down throughout the stages. But what about the controls? They were pretty easy. It was your typical control scheme where on the left you have your controller, on the right you had your primary attack and your 2 skills. It was smooth to use and it was something that was really intuitive. What I like that Supercell did with this game is they didn't make it so hard to understand. I play other action RPGs and there's a huge learning curve inside of those games, which is understandable. It's part of the genre. But Supercell is known for making games that you could dive right into and be able to play as a beginner, and then you kind of learn as you go. The progression system inside of all of their games is actually quite nice and makes it easier for players to download, play, and keep playing, rather than download, play, not understand, and uninstall. So what happens when you're progressing up the tower and your team fails? Your team dies. Well, at this point in time, if you get up to the tower, at one point I got to stage 13 or 14 and my team died. I had to start at level 1. Wow, that is brutal. Because if you get up to level 30 and then have to work your way all the way back up again from level 1, that's difficult for players. And at some point people are gonna say, I don't wanna do it all over again. But again, pre-alpha, there's a lot more that's gonna change. Maybe there'll be a stage where if you get to this point, you can't drop any lower than 5 stages below that, etc., etc. There's many ways it could be worked out, and this was just a general test so that we could experience what the game looks like, how it plays, and just the basic mechanics. And I can appreciate that, and I actually really appreciate that Supercell invited players in this early. I don't think they've ever had a pre-alpha testing session with both content creators as well as community members. Overall, I'm overwhelmingly positive about the game. I love the genre. I like how Supercell supercellified the game, making it short burst rounds and going up the tower, but I'm also really curious to see what else is gonna come. Will there be larger teams? Maybe 5-player teams, 10-player teams that can go through dungeons? Will there be team versus team where you and your teammates can go fight each other? There's a lot of different things that they can do to make this really fun. And if we do have a competitive element to it, I think esports could even be a thing. I mean, we know Supercell likes those kinds of things. I'd love to be involved, just saying. So what are some things that I'd like to see changed or developed over time? The number one is probably communication. When you're playing with a team, you're playing with randoms, and you have no way to communicate with them. If someone goes in another direction and doesn't ever get to the final boss, it can be frustrating and you can be waiting there for a while. A way to message someone or some direct commands that you can give that would be cool. Also, emotes would be really fun here too. I think the social element of this game is huge, and I think it's a big part of what they're trying to do. So implementing some type of a basic chat mechanic and emotes that you can use would be a huge win. On top of all that, I could see them implementing skins over time. Cosmetics are something that they do in all their games. I would anticipate we'll see that here as well, and probably some kind of a battle pass, but that is way down the line. And also, as I mentioned a moment ago, when you lose in the tower, some type of a mercy system so you don't have to go back to the complete beginning. At the same time, you don't want to make it too easy for players, but going up to level 30 and then dropping down back to level 1 is brutal, and it's going to burn people out. So maybe if you get to a boss stage, I didn't even mention the boss stages. Every 5 levels, you encounter a boss stage, which is a dual stage fight where you and your team take down this square with some type of an eye in it and a bunch of enemies around, and you have lasers and stuff. It can be tough to take down, and it takes you through 2 different realms, so it's actually a pretty cool mechanic. But if we were to lose at stage 30 to that boss, it would be cool if it knocked us back down to the previous stage right above the boss. So if we lose at stage 30, we get dropped down to stage 26, the stage right after beating the previous boss. That takes away some of that, what's the right word? Devastation you feel if you drop all the way down to the bottom. It would also be really cool if you could build up different classes at once. So for me, if I'm got one account all the way up to level 30, it would be cool if I could have another character under my same Supercell account that I could then start fresh, because maybe I don't want to grind that top level and I want to start the tower a little bit lower. It would be cool if I could have different characters associated with the same account so I could play at different levels, because it could be fun in that way. But again, there's going to be other game modes and other elements to this game that I anticipate coming to it, so that may not even be needed. Overall, from my community, I saw a ton of people so excited about this game. Not only that an action RPG is coming to Supercell, something that people have been waiting for a long time, but also that the game was so smooth. Now, of course, pre-alpha, there were some bugs, but nothing bad at all. It actually played quite nice. I was pleasantly surprised and very impressed with the quality of the game this early on. I'm not giving this a score. I can't score an early alpha, but I think that this is a great direction for Supercell to go in. I think that they've done a really nice job making an action RPG work for a mobile game and for a Supercell mobile game, something that has a huge success rate. I'm looking forward to see how this develops in the future and plan to bring you any information I have. Plus, I'm gonna do breakdowns and everything like that in the next couple of days for you guys as well, so you can really get a good understanding of each class, each stage, each boss, etc. I want to thank Frame and the entire Supercell team for supporting my channel, for giving me access to play this, and for allowing me to share it with all of you. I hope this helped give you guys a better idea of what Project Rise is going to be all about. And if you're excited about it, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any updates that I bring you. Because hey, there's another playtest coming. You're going to want to know.